Welcome to another episode of This Too Shall Suck podcast, where we talk about the real of grief, the whole grief, and nothing but the grief. Welcome back, my loves. I am your host, Loryn Denise, and I am so happy. Get into these vocals. There's going to be work money someday, okay? I'm so happy to have you guys here. If this is your first time here, welcome. I'm super, super thankful for you. If you're listening again, welcome back. And thank you so much for continuing to join me on this journey. On today's episode, we're going to be diving into something that I'm calling professional grief. And I know you're probably thinking like, what are you talking about? I mean, like you're kind of in a rut when it comes to your professional space, or I know a lot of people right now with COVID are losing their jobs and they're kind of having to pivot or reimagine what their life is because they have their kind of whole life set with this career. And now you may have been laid off or furloughed. And so they're just trying to figure it out. Or you had 2020 was the year of vision and everybody was like, yep, this is my year. And now 2020 came in here and showed out and was like, yeah, you thought, you thought you was going to open that. You thought you were going to do that. Yeah, sounds good. And so now you're like kind of just stuck and you're just kind of in this weird space of, I don't know what to do, or I don't know where to go with that. And so actually I'm going to have a conversation with a beautiful girl who I met through a friend. And we're just going to talk about kind of her journey with grief and how you kind of reimagine what professional grief is, or reimagine when you're in professional grief, I should say, and how to, she doesn't like the word pivot, but how to kind of change direction. There we go. How to change direction when it comes to that professional grief. But I can just kind of share, for me, I recognized that I was in a grieving stage when it came to, I guess, my profession, or just a profession in the past, because obviously I've been through grief. And so you kind of recognize those stages, right? When you're in grief, you start being in a place of, at least I have a job, or, well, it's paying the bills, or, it does pay good money. Like you start going into that denying that there's a problem, like that there's a problem with your boss, or that that's a problem with the work that you do and the correlation of what you're getting paid, or there's a problem that your coworker is getting paid more than you and does less than you. You start denying all those things and say, well, at least I have a job. Denial is a stage of grief, right? And so you start noticing those things. So when I started noticing that I was making excuses or denying the fact that these things were happening, is when I realized, like, you're grieving. Like you're literally grieving, and not like grieving because you're grieving your mom, or you're grieving your dad, or you're grieving whatever way it was at the time. Like you're literally in this state of like, you're grieving this profession and this career that you're in. And so once I started recognizing that I was in grief, I started reimagining what was next. And so, people are like, oh, well, don't quit your job until you have a next one. Well, for me, and I'll kind of dive into this on a whole nother episode, but at the time I was a flight attendant. I'll just put it out there. I was a flight attendant, and I realized, like, I want more for my life. Like I want more for my life. Like I need more for my life. But, you get flight benefits, girl. Like, you start making all these excuses for these things. And I was like, no, like you're grieving. Like you got to get out of this space. And so I just quit my job, tried this entrepreneurship thing, failed miserably. Like I said, I'm not going to go too far into that because we'll have a whole episode on that, but failed miserably. But then I was like, you got to reimagine who you are, who Loryn is. What is it that Loryn wants? And once that kind of happened, I kind of got back on the track that I needed to. And I can't say like, yeah, I've made it. Because, I mean, honestly, who's ever made it, right? Like you can look at all these celebrities and they're always striving for more. But as long as I'm aligned with God's will, I feel like I'm doing what I need to do. And that's kind of what I had to do, is recognize that I was in a space of grieving, to say, how do you get out of this space? And I'm not telling y'all to go and quit your job, get out that grief. I'm not saying that. So do not come on here talking about, Loryn, I quit my job like you. No. Don't. Entrepreneurship is not for the weak of heart. Let me be very clear on that. But you just have to reimagine what it is that you want for you and move according to that. So I will say that is that recognizing that I was in that space of grief helped me move in a different way that has gotten me to different successes and accomplishments in life that I have gotten so far that I know I'm going to continue to get. But again, I had to recognize that's what was happening to me in that profession in order for me to kind of move another way and operate in a different space. And it may for you, you may be in HR and be like, you know what, like, I don't think this is what I want to do. I really want to do project management, or I really want to, be create or curate festivals or whatever the case may be. Like you just have to recognize, like, I'm in a space of grieving this space that I'm in, this profession that I'm in. How do I get out of that? And then once you realize that, you will start to move in that way of where you need to go. So we're going to talk about a lot of that. I'm not going to harp on it because Denayja is her name. Denayja and we will get to talking and laughing. So I'm going to keep this short, but I'm super excited for you guys to hear. And we will talk about all of those things I just talked about, plus more after this break. Are you listening to my podcast right now and wondering, I wonder if I can start a podcast like Loryn did? Well, I'm here to tell you that you most definitely can. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. Number one, it's free. So no monthly subscriptions, no hidden fees. It's free 99. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. So no need to go out and buy hundreds of dollars equipment like I did. You can do it straight from your phone or computer. And Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many, many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today, and let's get back to the show. All right, guys, we are back and I'm super excited as always, but like, honestly, super excited to have this next guest in the building. I actually was introduced to her by Sydney, who was on the podcast, and we immediately clicked. And Sydney told me that she's like, y'all are going to be besties. And I mean, essentially we're like the same person because her personality is bomb. But I'm just going to read a quick bio and then we'll get right into it. Denayja Reese is an event strategist, producer, and writer whose love of culture has fueled her diverse career journey. From her time at the helm of San Francisco marketing agency, where she increased sales by 50% each year and worked with companies like Uber, San Francisco Giants, and Live Nation, to working on experiential campaigns for Airbnb, content at Coachella, and more as a consultant. Her full-service event production company, Girl With That Laugh Productions, has worked on events including A3C Festival and Conference and Black Tech Week. Girl With The Laugh Productions has managed over $600,000 in sponsorship revenue and generated over $50,000 in ticket sales. She remains guided by the principles of inspiration, connection, productivity, community, and self-expression, applying the concepts as the ethos of Girl With The Laugh Productions work. Denayja's big messages are, you deserve to be yourself and live your best life. Culture and storytelling are how we keep the lights on and when the world gets dark. And each of us is living a wholehearted, community and purpose-driven life will change the world. With that, I would like to welcome the one and only Denayja Reese. Boo, 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 boo.
Hello. Loryn, thank you for having me. I really live for these moments of having conversations about things that we're like, quote, not supposed to talk about. So This is great. I'm really excited. Yeah. I'm glad we can make this happen too, because we've had our trials.
Woo, Lord, this equipment been trying us, y'all. Life, retrogrades, everything has been trying our spirit. I'm like, no, me and Denayja are going to talk. Okay. We're going to get through this. Yeah. We're gonna make it through this. So thank you again for being here. I'm really excited to have you on, and I loved your bio. By the by, I was like, I need to use some of that.
Listen, right? Me too. I really need to. I was like, wow, because everything has changed. I rewrote that bio in January, maybe February, and everything in the world has changed since then. I told someone yesterday, I was like, I'm a completely different person than I was when the clock struck midnight on 2020.
Okay.
And I was like, yeah, we can keep that bio. Like, I think it's fine. But then I was like, is this really still? I was like, well, let me hear it when Loryn says it.
Right.
And I was like, oh no, this is still it. This still works.
This is me. This is me. We cool. We cool. Yeah. We cool. We good.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
I love it. No, it's wonderful. And I am just like honored for you to be here. So we'll dive right into it. Of course, I was telling everybody kind of what we're going to be talking about. So people don't, for people who don't know you, can you talk a little bit about your story with grief? Because I think it'll help the listeners understand why you were able to recognize the grief when it came to your professional life.
My mom passed away when I was 18 years old, 12 years now, in 2008. And it was very sudden. I literally went to bed. I woke up. I came in the living room. She said she couldn't breathe. And that was it. She left us soon thereafter. And so that in and of itself obviously was very traumatic. But now I'm in this space of just always going a little bit deeper. And I'm actually in therapy right now, really mulling through some like super tough emotions and things and just asking myself the deeper questions at all levels. And so I looked at that question and I thought, actually, my relationship with grief is much earlier than that. I think my relationship with grief truly started when it was first explained to me what death is and why and how it happens, which is somewhere between 3 and 4 years old. My first 9 years of life was very blurry. It amounts to what is probably 4 days of things. That was 9 years of living on the earth. But yeah, like I remember my aunt Phil had passed away, who my mother was very close to. She was like her sort of second mother, honestly. And she passed away when I was four. So it must have been around then, but I feel like it was maybe a little bit earlier. And they explained to me, we're not here forever. And the grief that created in me, like I'm an empath, like I have a Pisces moon. I just feel everything and I feel it. And I'm also really intellectual because I'm an Aquarius. And so there's this constant need to both feel and to intellectualize the feelings. And because I'm a person who kind of goes to extremes, sometimes I think I need to banish one or the other. And it's like, okay, you're just feeling and don't think. And then it's, okay, you're just thinking, don't feel. And I'm learning to kind of live in the space of both. But when they explain to me, we're not here forever. People die. And I'm going to die and you're going to die. And and that's really what they said to me. I'm the only child. And my mom was 18 when she had me. I just don't think she had the time to both survive, raise me, make me someone who would be a contribution to society rather than a detriment, and also keep up the magical fairy tale wonderland of childhood that people think they're supposed to have. I just don't. I think she looked at all those options like we won't be able to do that. So they were always just very, very real with me. And so yeah, they explained that to me, like we're all going to leave this earth at some point. And that created just a grief in me in that space of just like, oh, so we're all living to die. Like I understood that. Obviously I didn't understand it at the level that I do at 30, but my little like 3-4-year-old mind like got that of like, oh, this shit is fragile. Like I'm not just like here playing Barbies and like then I become my mom one day and like stuff, I become my grandma and like stuff like that concept of like this ends, just really created like a grief in me. And then my relationship with my father has had a lot of grief in it. He was very in and out of my life. My father just, one, is a human being. Two, is a Jamaican man who, if you can provide, you're a father. You're a great father, you're father of the year. You get the mug, you get the trophy, you get the tie. You get all of the sort of accolades that, I think at least he feels like that should come with. And so, for me, that was never really enough. And, there's a lot of like things that I could go into with that. But I think the gist of it was just a grief and a sense of him not being there and longing for him and longing for that relationship with him and for him to be this guy that I like really needed him to be and also really wanted him to be and just, not having that. So yeah, I think my whole life honestly has been kind of based in grief. But what I think is the truest for me about grief is that, grief is just love with nowhere to go. And I think that's really what it is. And so I don't think of it as much now as, oh my God, grief has like followed me throughout my life. I think I have lost a lot of love or had a lot of love I didn't know what to do with. and also was looking for a lot of love. It all really comes back to love, honestly. So yeah, that's kind of my journey with grief. And then, you know, when my mom passed away, I've kind of been through all of the cycles of grief and also recovery. When my mom passed away, I was 18, and I had to just kind of, I shouldn't say that, I felt like I had to kind of get it together and get on with my life. And I felt a lot of expectations on me. It was both the expectations of the people who were rooting for me, who were like, you're going to be okay. And I really believe that, which was very much my grandmother and my grandfather, whose birthday is today. And, you know, just other people in my family. And then there were also a lot of people in my family who I think thought that I was going to, like, I mean, honestly, addiction and lots of other things, incarceration, plenty of things kind of run in my family, as they do, as that is the trauma of so many of our families as Black people. But I think everyone just, it was like, you know, the split between the people who were like on one side of the arena who were like, you're going to do this, it's going to be fine. And, you know, you're going to make your mom proud. And that was always like the thing, right? Going to make your mom proud. And then on the other side of the people who were like, I don't know, I would be surprised if she really, you know. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to prove all these people wrong. I'm going to prove all these people right. And like, that's where I'm going. And so I kind of channeled my grief into like accomplishment, and then also just kind of checked out of everything. And so I kind of really fell into addiction and all kind of manners of really bad behaviors, in the sense that they were really, truly bad for me. And I was both keeping it together and falling apart at the same time for like 5 years. And it was this constant ping pong back and forth between that. And that was really my grief talking, and my grief not really knowing how to express itself and not really having the space to. And then at some point I really hit rock bottom, and realized that I needed to go and deal with this like truly once and for all, 5-6 years in. And I did. And then, you know, now we're on the other side of that. So that's my journey with grief.
Oh my gosh, that was so good, because I'm like, yes, yep, hit that. I love that statement that you made, that grief is just love that is lost or has nowhere to go, because I think that's so true. That's all it is when someone passes, or when you lose a job, or like you said, you're longing for your father to be there. Like, you just want that love to be placed somewhere, and it doesn't have anywhere to go. Girl, I mean, so many points. I mean, that ping pong between being good and bad, girl. Oh, Lord, the unhealthy coping mechanisms. I have a whole episode on that. I might need to bring you back, actually. So when did you, because of course we're talking about kind of this professional world, when did you realize that you were dealing with grief that wasn't necessarily associated, you know, with your mom or any of the family grief, and that it had to do with your career that was going on, especially in 2020?
Right. So you, in this time of COVID, as I like to say that with like a very deep voice, like in the time of COVID. I think it's
like Morgan
like
Freeman.
Yeah, exactly. It brings like a reverence to it, and like a very like outside looking in, even because I'm a very future oriented person too. So it's a big coping mechanism for me that can be healthy, but you know, all the healthy coping mechanisms can also be unhealthy. That's what's crazy about it. That dime can flip. But yeah, I think with my career, and so as you said earlier in my bio, I still kind of am an event strategist and really also an event producer. And I spent the last 4 years of my life, 3 to 4 years of my life, really traveling around the country doing events. In 2018, I think I worked on, that was like my kind of peak year, I won't even lie, which was 3 years into starting that career and like restarting my career and really my life. And I think I did like 40 events. Like I individually produced, I think 13 or 14, maybe 15. And then I worked on another 13 or 14. Oh, wow. And that was, and it was incredible. It was just a great year. And I loved, because going back to the love, right? Like I love bringing people together. I realize now in this like middle kind of space, this post-COVID world, I realized I loved being needed. Because like when you're the event producer, it's like being the director on a set, right? It's like really 50% of what you're there for is to guide and answer questions so that everyone else can like run this machine that you can't run by yourself. Mm-hmm. And yet you're also the most important part of. It's like you're both the most important part and also non-essential. It's a very strange line. And like, if you're really doing your job right, you really are both, right? You know? And so, yeah, I loved it. I loved it so so much. I especially love being on planes. Like I just changed my Instagram bio the other day. It was LA based airport bound. And I was like, well, let's take that out because that ain't true anymore. I may never see an airport again now.
Okay.
Like,
2022.
You know? Listen. And so, yeah, but I took that out. But yeah, that was me on the road all the time. I mean, I actually didn't have an apartment from 2017 until March of 2000. From April of 2017 to March of 2019, I did not have an apartment. I would be back in LA for maybe 2 or 3 weeks at a time. I lived in Atlanta for 3 months. Yeah, I was just kind of all over the place. And I wasn't even sure that I was really committing to LA. I grew up here in LA and I live here now, and I have very much committed to it, especially now in the time of COVID when, you know, all these other states seem to have lost their ever-loving minds. And I am very happy to live in a place where they care if I live or die. And so, yes, I'm going to be in LA for the foreseeable future. And yeah, I realized that I was in grief, that we as people, as a culture and society, as a world, were in grief. Honestly, when I read this article in The Atlantic, that if you do show notes, I will send it to you and everyone can read it. It came out like, I think in April. So it's definitely, there's a lot that has changed since then. But in that moment, that article gave me the space to name it as grief. And I think I'm very big on that. That's why I love stories. That's why I love storytelling, and not just storytelling like, you know, film or television or journalism, but like talking to people and hearing their stories and sharing your own. It's the most powerful way, even still with like, you know, therapy. I have all these different kind of ways of getting to those things, but there's still like somebody could say something, tell a little piece of their story, frame something in a way, and it can unlock anything in you, from like years of trauma to like a freedom to joy. I mean, anything, just from like hearing the story and like connecting to it. So this man wrote this amazing article in, you know, the early parts of this pandemic, where he said, you know, we're all grieving. That's what we're doing. And it feels like we feel, you know, you go through these stages. Everybody thinks the stages are linear, and they're not. You know, the denial, the anger, the acceptance, I never can memorize them, but there's 7 of them. You know, we're all
I
bargaining, like all of that.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're going through all of the things, and him saying that gave me that space. And because I know grief, because I've had a relationship with it my whole life, I was like, oh yeah, that is what I feel. And for me, as a person who did events and did larger scale events too, I worked on a lot of festivals, and I didn't produce those all myself. I mean, I didn't really. Producing a festival is like running a city. Like the garbage person is as important as the mayor. You know, it's like we all really have a job to do. So yeah, like I worked in these huge teams. You know, working on things like Coachella, where there's literally 125,000+ people in this festival in this area. Like you're building small cities for multiple days. You know, and to know that like that is something God only knows when we will do again. Like a lot of those things have been postponed for next year, and I don't know about it. So it just, you know, realizing like all of that is just gone, right? And for me, it really hit when South by Southwest was canceled, because Sydney and I actually were going to go out there and produce like a whole house activation, which those are really popular during South by Southwest, and they canceled it. And that was my first inclination of like, oh, this is a big deal. Like this is not just something that is going to go away in a couple weeks. And I just started grieving immediately. And I remember laying in bed in March and praying, literally praying and saying, God, you know, this is going to be something. I don't know what it's going to be, but it's going to be something. And if it is for me, even with all that I know I'm about to lose, this is an opportunity for me to go in another direction, to go somewhere else. I follow you. And I follow that. And like, I'm not scared. And I went to sleep. Like it wasn't even like an I'm going to get on my knees prayer. It was like literally laying in bed, like about to kind of drift off, like, I got this for you, Lord, and like letting it go. And that's really the space that I've been living in. And yeah, it hurt. It still does. I mean, just now I was like, what I wouldn't give, like a couple hours ago, what I wouldn't give to go to a concert and just like be in that moment with everybody. You know, there's certain things I couldn't watch recently because they were doing events. Like there's an episode of Insecure this past season where she produced a block party. He's the main character. And I wanted to cry because I was just like, when will we get to that again? And even when we do, like, it won't feel the same. It will never, like this, it's never going to feel the same again. It just isn't, you know? And I think even when we get back to as close to it as we can, whenever that is, this will always live in the back of my mind, like grief, right? You know, like no matter what I've accomplished, what I've done, or just the high points in my life since my mom has died, there's always that little piece of me that goes, oh, only my mom could see this. Like, oh, only Adrienne could be here. You know, every Father's Day, I still grieve a little bit because I haven't spoken to my father in 2 years. And he lives like, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes from here.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just like, that's what grief is. It's something you live with forever. And so I think with my career, that's exactly what it was. Like, I also, though, I'm big on gratitude. And so in the grieving of my career, I've also been extremely grateful because I had it. You know, there's so many people who were like, this year is my year and I'm finally going to do this thing I've always wanted to do. And now that's gone for them. And for me, it's like, yeah, there's all these dreams that I had and like they're beautiful and they're still valid and I could get to them one day. But also I lived a lot of my own dreams effortlessly and with ease and so many other gifts like I was given during that time. And it keeps bringing me back to that. Just as much as I'm in grief, I'm like, but at least I have something to grieve.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No, I absolutely love that. I think you're absolutely right. Is that everybody's like 2020 year of vision. Woo!
Mm-hmm.
Girl, everybody blind. Okay. Everybody is blind.
I've seen enough.
Okay. I'm like Bird Box up in here. Just blindfold me. I don't need to see nothing outside. I'm cool with it. Like, let's try again. Because clearly this is not it. But I think you hit on some really great points, though, is just understanding. So I wanted to kind of piggyback off of that. And again, we talked about the 7 kind of stages of grief, but I think that's more of kind of when you're in that grief stage and you're like denial, acceptance, understanding, you know, all that stuff. Right. Can you share with us what are some of the signs that you kind of noticed? Obviously, like you say, you kind of lived with it and you understood, but what are the signs that may help others who are in kind of a space and they're like, oh, I don't really know what this is, who may not recognize it as grief. And now they're like, oh, dang, like, yeah, like she's talking about this. Like, I am kind of grieving what's going on, right? Well, in their professional life, like kind of grieving what's going on.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think everyone absolutely is. Because this is, I mean, let's just be real here. Our economy has tanked. It is in the gutter. Like it, and Lord, I mean, even in the best case scenario of like full repositioning politically and all these things, next year is going to be about rebuilding and ain't nothing easy about that. Mm-hmm. Like people keep saying that. My friend the other day, God bless her, she was like, this New Year's Eve might be the best one yet. I was like, girl, I'm gonna be in my house. Like, what are you talking about?
Okay, I'm gonna be in the house celebrating. I'm not going out with y'all.
Yeah, like after all this, like, and even her, and she's like a smart person, and like, but she's also just such a deep optimist, and so there's still this idea even in her head of like, oh, you know, a switch will be flipped and it will be fine. You know? And like, we're gonna go and put on a top hat and fill in glasses. Like, I'm just like, no. And so, you know,
I'll be in my house popping champagne. Thank you.
Right, but when you look at it, that's also grief. Right? Like that's kind of a grief, right? Of like this longing to go, it's a grief because it's denial and it's like this bargaining of like, oh, you know, we'll get through this. And then you're like, no, let it go. You know, so I think I will say this. I have also, surprisingly, you know, I've had clinical depression my whole life. Shocker, the toddler who found out about death and was like, what? She had clinical depression since she was 9. No kidding. So yeah, so I've had this clinical depression since I was 9. I've had anxiety since I was 13. And, you know, learning the difference between even those 3, right, has been tricky for me. And I think a lot more of us have depression and deal with anxiety than people realize. And I think it's been a great kind of cultural shift watching people understand that. And again, like, nothing happens in a vacuum. Like the generation born into economic recessions and in school shootings and 9/11 and all these things, we're depressed. You know? I can't imagine why. So yeah, you know, like I think it's always a constant asking myself of. I just went through that over the last few days, this last week. I've been like, are you depressed? You know, and learning that the answer is not always yes. And I think for so many years, because I was battling with that depression instead of, you know, learning how to really live with it, everything felt like depression. And I also was numbing so heavily, right? And the thing with numbing is that when it wears off, it really wears off. Like when you take medication, right? Like you're totally fine. And when that migraine comes back, it's like you never had an Advil or whatever, you know? And I think like I lived like that for so long, where the only way I could feel was just being like, I'm in bed for 3 days at a time. Like actually I've had a depressive episode every July since 2013. And something about this month, I don't know if it's cancer season. I don't know if it's the middle of the year, but I just get real sad. And it's just like, it's really intense. And so this year I was like, I'm going to try to meet that where it is, but not have that this year. Like I would like to break that cycle this year. And, you know, it's not over yet, so let's see. But yeah, like I think a big way to recognize when you're in grief is the desire for something that is to be different. That feeling in and of itself is a grief. And I find that we only reach for that feeling when we're in grief and when we're losing something. You know, when you're in a relationship and that relationship ends or it's ending, right? Like that is a grief in and of itself. And you immediately go to that place of what if we could do this and I could do this and, you know, you could do this and all that. And it's not going to happen. You go into that bargaining, right? And you're accepting it in different ways and you're acting out and you're angry. Like anytime you're losing something and you think like this thing that is, I wish it were different, that is grief. And so whenever I find myself falling into that, no matter what it is, I'm like, oh, I'm grieving something a little bit, you know? And then when you're able to let it go easily, that is less so of grief. Like it is still, but when you're able to kind of flow through that of, you know, I wish this was this way, but like I'm accepting what it is, that is a part of it, but it's you moving into a different place. I think when you really find yourself in the grief, it's hard to get to that next place of like, but this is what it is. And I heard Oprah say that once. So like that's so much of what living in opposition to life is. Gary Zukav says this a lot too, who wrote The Seed of the Soul. It's not accepting what is and just saying, you know, so much of what we're going through as a country, as a society, as a world would be different if we said, you know, this is the way this is, and we need to accept it as such. There's a lot of things we should not accept, and a lot of things that can be different and should be different, and that I hope will change. But there's many things that are, and a lot of our grief and our strife comes from not accepting that.
I love that. I think that's absolutely true. And I can think about a couple times, I'm not going to say when, but I can think about a couple times in my professional life, like you said, I'm just wanting for something to be different. But I mean, you know, at least I have this. Like that's, we try and have, it's like trying to pull yourself into this positive place when you know that's not how you feel. Like, I don't want to be here. I'm not happy here. This is not conducive to my health, but at least I have, you know, a job or whatever the case may be, or at least I have a paycheck. But again, you're just grieving, wanting to be in a different place. So I love that. Thank you for saying that. And we kind of talked about this a little bit when we I guess did a pre-interview. As far as the creatives, there's a lot of creatives who are listening, and I guess now am I a creative? I guess because of this podcast, but
You are.
oh shit, okay, I'm part of the club. Hey, yeah. I'm part of the club, y'all. I'll let your girl.
Creativity exists in all of us. What is the issue is that creativity has been monetized to such a point that people think that they can't access it, because that's what we like to do with capitalism, is we like to create points of access through things like money and fame and a lot of things that aren't true. But every single one of us is creative. We're all creatives. And
yes. Y'all heard that? Denayja said it. Y'all are all creatives. Love it. Sorry, I just got hyped. So do you think creatives collectively are kind of grieving the industry, because the industry, like you said, is going to be changing. It's changing, obviously. Like, you know, I talked to Sydney a lot, who's kind of in the gig industry, and then you and some other heavy creatives, as I call you, professional creatives, as I call you guys. Like, do you think the industry as a whole is grieving the changes that are going to come from it?
1,000%, yeah. 1,000% yes. Before I fully answer that, there is one thing I just want to say about the idea of acceptance and grief and everything. And you'll hear this if you've ever been in recovery, if you've ever been in an AA meeting or an NA meeting. It's the serenity prayer, which is God grant me, or whatever higher power grant me the serenity to change the things. What is it? God grant me the serenity, accept the things I cannot change. Mm-hmm. What's the second part?
Look, girl, listen, don't ask me to memorize no stuff, child.
Oh my God, no, it's so funny. I say this all the time. For some reason, I've forgotten it. But it's God grant me the serenity, accept the things I cannot change.
Somebody go get us together.
And the wisdom to know the strength to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's what it is. Sorry. My little brain sometimes. I smoke a lot of weed. Sometimes things look crazy.
Girl, look, I was on Google like, I got you, girl. Hold on one second.
Yeah, like just it'll leave me. But yeah, no, I think that 1,000%. Like, I think we all should say the serenity prayer in all times, and I believe in that so much, because that's so much of what life is it really is a serenity to just accept the things you cannot change, and if you can change it, you find the strength to do so. And sometimes that strength comes from leaning on other people, asking for help, all of those things, and knowing the difference. And that's probably the hardest part, honestly, because once you get the strength, you can change anything. You can accept really anything if you allow yourself to, but the wisdom to know the difference, that's the shit that'll keep you up at night. You always want to say that. But yeah, in terms of creative grief, I mean, I live in Los Angeles, right? And I grew up here.
Yeah.
So I know this industry in a way that a lot of people who don't grow up here in proximity to it in such a way just simply don't, because it's our regular ass lives. Like, when you go to your friends' houses who are nobody famous and they got Emmys and Oscars line in the show, and they're not Will Smith, you know what I mean? Like, they're not these superstars. Like, they're regular people, and they just won a bunch of sound design Emmys, or best score at the Oscars in 1982. And they're just regular people. Seriously, they're just regular people. So yeah, like living here, the grief is real. Like, we don't know any given day on like the Fox production lot, where my best friend, who's like a brother to me, where his father works, he's the head of the catering department. He hasn't been to work in months, and really been to work in months. And he used to be there for 12 hours every day, on a regular day at a studio lot like that. There's 3,000 people running around just doing anything. And so it's filming 18 different things at a time. Who knows? Sometimes there's just one singular thing being shot, and there's 2,000 people here. So when we go back to that, like, I know they are filming some things right now. I know, the FaceTime photo shoot is really big with magazines right now, or, just a lone person, like, in this kind of backyard space, Chloe and Halle doing their incredible tennis court theatrics and performances. We're adapting, we're doing what we have to do, virtual events, all these things, but we're still grieving what we love, which is the real life thing, which is being on those sets, which is the constant flow of work, of award shows, of, releases and festivals and all those things. But we're grieving them because that's how we lived for so long. I don't know that we're entirely grieving them because they were so great. You know what I mean? And I think that started really showing up for us during this uprising and this revolution that we're in, right? Because at first it was just grieving the pandemic and not knowing when we'd all really be going back to work, this kind of idea that maybe we might go back in 2 or 3 weeks, like all these things kind of happening at once. I think when the uprising started and we had to also grapple with the disparities in our industries as creatives, that is when I think it became a lot easier for a lot of people to say, okay, yeah, you know what? I'm not in such a rush to go back. There's like a meme I kept saying of that on Instagram. It was like, let's think about what we're trying to go back to. And are these things that we really want to go back to? Edward Enningsel, who's the editor of British Vogue, they went, because Europe is back in operation because they have people in leadership who aren't complete psychopaths. And so they have been able to go back to work and life to some degree. And Edward Enningsel tweeted yesterday that the security guard racially profiled him, because, now everybody's wearing masks, right? So it's so hard to be like, oh, that's Edward Enningsel, right? It just looks like a black man wandering through this British Vogue office. And he was like, as we go back to quote unquote normal, let's not go back to this, And so I think as much as we are grieving and we're knowing full well that like a lot of things simply won't be the same, like a lot of our favorite TV shows we don't know when we'll see again, a lot of these movies that are still sitting on the shelf. Like, there were a lot of really anticipated films for this year that, a lot of Black creatives were tied to, that they don't get to promote in the same way. I mean, Issa Rae's movie Lovebirds, which was, I honestly, first of all, was fantastic and is on Netflix. And if you haven't watched it, please watch it. I'm not a rom-com girl, but that shit was funny. And I loved it. I loved it so much. And that should have been like a big moment. Like that could have easily taken top 3 at the box office, maybe even won, honestly. Like if they had been able to do the promotion that you do, right? The talk shows, the radio, like all of these things that just weren't happening in the same way. I mean, you know, the movie theaters were shut down. So it went from a movie that was going to be released all across the world to being on Netflix, which is not nothing, don't get me wrong, but it's different, you know? So Tracy Ellis Ross, her first big feature film starring her, like the whole thing. I can't imagine what that grief was like for her. And like, yes, of course, she's Tracy Ellis Ross. She will be fine. We know this. Yeah. But can you imagine, like, she's 47 years old. She's been in the industry for years as a Black woman. Tracy Ellis Ross is so incredibly talented, is the star of a major network television show, is literally Diana Ross's daughter. And the fact that she has not had, even her co-star, Dakota Johnson, who's Don Johnson's daughter, is part of the blockbuster franchise that is 50 Shades of Grey. And Don Johnson is nobody's Diana Ross. I'll tell you that. You know, I will tell you that. Okay. And so, like, just seeing the disparities there and like watching creatives have to sort of grieve these big moments that were supposed to be their kind of consolation prizes, right, to this disparity that they have to just live with, that we're all supposed to just live with. But to watch them grieve that and then also have to reckon with that at the same time, I definitely think we're dealing with a lot of grief. I definitely think we're questioning, even in the best case scenario, like where we go from here in like a real true way. I think we've been reacquainted with what matters, like what really, really matters. And not to say that creativity doesn't matter, that art doesn't matter, or that art and commerce have to be entirely separated. But I think as creatives, as human beings, we've realized that like these things that we thought were so important that our lives used to revolve around are not what matters.
And you hear my snap? No, I mean, you right, girl. Listen, I ain't got nothing to say after that. So, so we talked about this also a little bit. How did you pivot during this time? I know we talked about how pivot is the word of 2020.
I literally gagged when you said that. I literally was like,
I know you did.
I know
you did. That's why I'm laughing. Because I'm like, I'm going to say pivot. She going to be like,
yeah, literally.
How did you transition? There we go. Transition?
There we go. I love that.
Yeah, I like pivot.
I like reimagine.
There we go. Reimagine.
Yeah, they were like, I like reimagine.
Instead of pivot.
I was like, let's take that.
All right. How did you reimagine during this crazy pandemic that we're in?
To tell you God's honest truth, I really still haven't, honestly. I really still have not. I'm privileged on top of privilege to not have had to do that, honestly. One, I had gotten a contract earlier in the year that financially carried me through to like the end of April. I live with a roommate who's very understanding. So when I hit a bit of a rough patch between that ending and then getting on unemployment, which I was also very blessed to be able to do and privileged to be able to do, right? Like I'm an American citizen, I'm a California resident, you know, I was able to claim these benefits, stimulus check, all these things. So because of that, I didn't really have to. I mean, we pretty much just shut down, honestly, because I wasn't in a place where, you know, I'll be truthful in saying that like my career was good and I was enjoying it, but this year was a make or break year for me. And I guess still is because we're still in it. But I say was because frankly, it broke. I said that at the top of the year. I was like, we're in a place where I'm grateful for what I've been able to do, but there's such a different direction I want to go in. I was actually going to launch my own festival this year. There's like other things that I was planning on doing a lot more in-house events. And I was like, okay, you know, we're either going to do great things this year and move into this direction, or something's going to change dramatically that will be adverse to that. And I would probably flow with whatever that looks like. And I said that in like February, and I said that a lot, like throughout the whole top of the year. And then when this happened, I think that's why I was so quick to do that prayer, to be like, okay, so I think this is it. And so, yeah, I don't have kids, right? Like I don't really have dependents. Like there's no one who's like, my livelihood is tied to yours. So I didn't have to reimagine my business. I didn't have to, transition into something else. I have a few friends in the industry who have fully transitioned into virtual events and things, and even transitioned to special projects into doing that. And, I think it's fine. It's very much a means to an end. It's something people are having to do. But I don't think anybody's like, oh, I love this. Like, if I could do this in real life, I would still sit behind this computer for 8 hours. Like, no, So I think, people are surviving and doing what they have to do based on, where they are. But for me, I didn't have to do that. And so I really haven't. I think the part that I reimagined is that, to be totally honest, as much as I love producing events and I can't wait to go back to it, for me, that's a lot of why I haven't done much of the virtual things. And I am going to be doing some things this fall with clients, nothing kind of under the umbrella of Girl with That Laugh Productions at all, because I am ready. I'm waiting for when we can go back, and whatever that looks like. If it's, excuse me, if it's masks and temperature checks and plastic pods and all of that. And I don't mean in the way that people are doing it now, which is kind of weird, but I mean like a year from now, right? Like the next summer, when we can have those block parties again and what that could look like. When it feels safer for people and is safer for people. I can't wait for that. And I definitely will be doing that. But right now, I am reimagining I'm getting reconnected, I should say, to my dream. And like the dreams that I had really talked myself out of. I'm a very pragmatic person. So I relate everything to my chart just because I've studied astrology since I was 7. And it's just how it's been a lot of the way that I've seen the world through. So I always go back to it. And most of my chart is Capricorn. I'm a very intense person when it comes to discipline and structure and goal setting. Like that's my default, right? And so doing anything in kind of, I would say opposition, anything different from that at all is me stretching, right? And so in this time, I've been stretching myself by not really having a structure. Like I sometimes miss that feeling of 17,000 emails in my box, in my inbox, and needing to be needed or, all of that. And I just had to learn to let that go and just be. It's so crazy that it took this pandemic. I've been meditating for 3 years. And, the number one message of meditation is presence. And I've always been able to get to presence when I meditate. But getting into it in other parts of my life is always hard for me. And it's become so much easier during this time because I just wake up. Even today is a great example. I woke up today and I was like, okay, there are some things that I kind of need to do. But I also have all these, I have this podcast and I have other virtual. I don't do a lot of the virtual things. I only really do them when I'm supporting specific people, right? If there's not a human being on the other side of this, that I'm I'm here for you, you're probably not going to see me in the live chat or in the Zoom,
Mm-hmm.
So I have a bunch of those things today. And so I had to just sit and be okay, what are my needs today? What am I kind of scheduled in for? How do I find that balance? And that's what I do every day. I spend a lot of time. I realized I love having these conversations. I really see myself at some point having a talk show, and not in the traditional, we sit on a couch and kind of this rotating guest opening monologue kind of style, but not entirely away from that either. It's been a dream of mine my entire life. I'm a child of Oprah. Our birthdays she's the day before mine and the day after. And I just always, we don't give enough credit to that woman, and not just in terms of the wealth and the career, but the fact that talking about things like sexual assault and domestic abuse and race, Oprah's been talking about race on TV for 30 years, so much of the way the world has shifted. There is no Barack Obama election without Oprah Winfrey. And that's just the truth, and I think now that we've gotten away from that time, people don't remember that. But I remember Chris Rock joking about it, being Oprah basically picked the president. So that's how much power she had at the time, and also how much people trusted her in terms of these conversations. And I really strive for building on that legacy, honestly, of just let's talk about the things we don't talk about and normalize, quote unquote, these things that are people that exist, that are having these experiences. And we just don't talk about them because of, patriarchy and white supremacy and capitalism and all these things. So that's really where I'm kind of reimagining my career towards doing things like that. I'm writing this book of mine that is now on draft. We're moving into draft 3. So my next phase is editing. There's 9 sort of chapters, and within those there's kind of, I keep framing it like albums, right?
Mm-hmm.
So think of it as 9 albums and various tracks inside of each one. So now I'm restructuring all of that, just like in the editing process. I did my shitty first draft like a year and a half ago. I did my like a little bit better second edit. I just wrapped up a couple weeks ago, and now I'm going back in. I think I'm probably going to end up doing 5 drafts by the time it's all said and done. And yeah, I'm focused on that a lot. And then I'm going to start, getting back into work. I think I'm moving more into project management, because that's so much of what a lot of these virtual things really amount to. It's not the same as doing an event. It's really more of either project management, a content creation, digital platform building. It's other things. It's not event production, which is okay. It's just okay. So I'm going to be picking up some of those at like a contract level over the next few months, and then looking into basically separating my career and like my creativity and my, sort of creative career, as it were, from work that I do to make money that is monetizing skills that I have. And I think that's a big distinction for me that has come out of this time. I think because of us being so creative and even coming up with the idea of being a creative, like we were so like for the last 10, 12 years, like we had just people just made up these jobs. The whole idea of like influencers and the influencer economy, like we built that shit out of just what we had, out of social media, out of coming into the workforce at an economic downturn, like a recession, like all of these things, like we did that, and I think we've kind of trapped ourselves a little bit in that, right? And I think this was an opportunity for people to let go of that a little bit and be like, I am not an event producer. That's a thing I did for money. I'm actually Denayja Reese, Adrienne and Derek's daughter. I'm Aura Reese and James's granddaughter. I'm funny and I'm warm and pissed off sometimes. I laugh a lot. Like I'm all of these things. I do production for money, and I write as a creative space, and I can monetize it in this way, but I can also write from my soul and put that out into the world however I want to. I can produce things because that's who I am. That's a part of who I am. That's a skill that I have. I am not a producer. I am not here like a chicken is a producer. I am a human being.
No, that's real. I love that, because I think so many people get so attached to what they do. Because like you said, for me, like I'm project manager by day, podcaster by night. But, I'm not like I'm Loryn Denise, the project manager. No. That's just something that I'm skilled at, but that's not who I am as a human being. And I think that's the biggest takeaway for me. And I mean, again, you hit several different points, but just taking this time to reimagine what it is or who it is really that you want to be. I think if you ever had time in your life, the time is now, because everything has slowed down. Yes, I know things are opening back up. Georgia has no idea what's going on. Mommy and daddy are arguing, but
literally,
girl. So, but this is the time to reimagine, like, okay, what is it that I want to do? If I want to start a business, how do I start that business? Just start the business. Like I am just and again, I'm going to talk about this. Y'all know I love, hyping up whatever episodes, but an episode about grieving failed businesses. I have started an event planning business and it failed tremendously, like failed. And I actually started one at the beginning of this year, but again, I had to, I was about to say pivot again, reimagine what it looked like in order for me to help people with grief. For me, I thought I was going to be doing events and creating these spaces to be able to do that. And I could still do that online, but it's just not something that, to me, God placed in my heart, and I reimagined, and we turned into this podcast. So if you didn't listen to anything that Denayja said, reimagine who it is. Like if you're in a space that you don't feel, or you're grieving, or you don't feel like I'm this person, or I'm just attached to whatever it is that your professional title is, the time is now to reimagine it. Like, who gonna stop you? You can only reimagine you. I can't reimagine you. Denayja can't reimagine you. Like, you're the only one who can reimagine you. So, sorry, I went on a tangent. Anyways.
No, it's so true. No, say all of those things, because that's so true. And I think that now is such a good time for that. I think first of all, if survival is not enough for you right now, I don't know what to tell you.
Okay.
I really don't. I'm so serious. Like, I'm not even being funny. I'm not being hyperbolic. Like, if surviving this time when over 130,000 people have died, if it's not enough for you to still be here, to still be healthy, to be able to be safe, to be having nothing to worry about except the reimagining of your career and life and what have you, if that's not enough for you, I don't know what to say.
Literally.
You know? And so I think if that's where you are, you're so extremely blessed that you owe it to yourself and to the new world that we go into to fully come into it as whoever and whatever you want to be, because what are you waiting for? You know, because you're not always going to be so blessed to not be in those numbers.
That's right.
You know?
That's right. That's right. And although this moment is weird, it's also a blessing because, again, you're, like you say, you're in that space to be able to reimagine. And so just take the time to reimagine, guys. Because me and Denayja will go all day. This is going to be my last question.
Okay.
Look, it's like, okay, I'm ready. And you kind of touched on it in your last statement, but I mean, what's next in your career? What's next for the evolution, as I say, of Miss Denayja? Because I just think you're such a wonderful person, and just listening to you and having conversation with you. I mean, I'm just honored that you're here, but what's next? I mean, because you've done so much. What's next, girl?
Thank you. I can't tell you because, and not because it's like some top secret thing. I wish it was like something that I signed. It's like an NDA I signed. No. I honestly, like I said, am very much living in the present. I have some kind of future dreaming, but I'm not going too deep into it. And that's such a practice for me right now. I don't think there is a what's next for any of us right now. We are in the middle of this. Like we are in the middle of this. And I was talking to somebody yesterday and he was like, you know, there is no light at the end of the tunnel right now. There just isn't. There just isn't. I mean, I can't be who I am and not hate the truth of that. Like, our president is an imbecile. He has, as of yesterday, dismissed the CDC in the middle of a global pandemic as people continue to die every single day and thousands more are hospitalized, as the American Healthcare American Healthcare System, the broken American Healthcare System is imploding. You know what I mean? Like, and he's talking about ignore the CDC, send your kids to school, you know, and the CDC has told us that fall and winter of next year are going to be horrific, you know, and that's just the truth. And to deny that and I'm no better than the president, right? If I try to say that, like, oh, but, you know, despite all of that, you should be really optimistic about what's next. Like, no, you know, no. I'm in the middle of this, like we all are. I think in the space, like I am going to do some ritual work. I'm very, very spiritual, and I do moon rituals and meditation and stuff like that, which Sydney also does. Sydney leads some of the best meditation, does incredible tarot work. And, you know, for me, I'm big on ritual work, and I plan on doing a ritual because, you know, we're in the age of Aquarius right now because Saturn has entered Aquarius. Like most of our generation, so people who are anywhere right now, who are anywhere from like 28 to about 34, 35, roughly, a little younger. We were all born with Saturn in Capricorn, which is part of why we're all so intense and how we became this generation of people who were like, I don't just have a job, I am. You know, like that's a generation of not only Saturn and Capricorn, but like a few other planets that are really important in that regard. So now we have shifted into the age of Aquarius. And Aquarians are very much about community. We're very much about the future, but like the best future. Like I have a card, my sister earlier this year gave me Gabby Bernstein's like spirit cards, and I pull 3 of them at the top of every week. And one of the ones that I pulled this week is like, I don't pray for any outcome. I pray for the highest good for all involved. And that's kind of where I am right now. So I have things that I'm dreaming about that I can't wait to do. And I've really kind of honed in on like what that is. Like I read Patrice Kahn Colors, who's one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter and probably the most visible of all of them. And she went to my high school and like was a counselor in a program I was in, and was just like one of the most phenomenal people really walking this earth. And when you read her book, which is called When They Call You a Terrorist, and when I say when you read, because everyone should absolutely read this book, she goes through her life and talks about her story, tells her story, and by the end of it, you realize, by the middle of it, you realize that there was no one else. There is no one else who could have been a co-founder of Black Lives Matter. Like it's her journey, right? From growing up caring for her brother who has mental health issues, to growing up poor and growing up in the Valley, which is a suburb of Los Angeles that I also grew up in, where there's this very intense disparity between, like I said, the people who are like regular Hollywood workers who have Oscars and houses and all these things but aren't necessarily rich, and then all the Black and brown people who live right next to them who are living in Section 8 housing, you know, which I also grew up in. And so from that into going to the same high school that I went to, where we were taught how to be activists, taught to think critically about things like race and gender and all of this, to the moment that she got pushed into with Trayvon Martin and being, you know, the right age. If she had been 17, she wouldn't have been able to do what she was able to do during that time. And just realizing that our journeys are leading us to authenticity, and we have to lean into that. And I think now, with all of these trappings removed, we're much better able to hear those voices, you know? And so when I think about the things I want to do in the new world, they're all so authentic to like who I really am. And I know that because all I've done for the last 4 months is be who I am and think how I think and live how I live, because I've just been in this apartment by myself for the most part, you know? So I can't say what's next. I can say that there are things with this ritual I'm doing next month, a world that I want to see us all come together and just manifest. And that's really what I'm doing right now, is just believing in the possibilities of things, because it's the first step. You know, it really is. It's like, we are only here. Me, you are only here as free Black women because our ancestors just dreamed that, like that shirt, you know, I hate those random t-shirts that people put on Twitter. I really do. But the one I love is I am my ancestors' wildest dreams, because we are. Like, we really are. Like, everything about us is a wild dream of people who were born in chains and believe so thoroughly that there could be a time, maybe one day, when we would be out of those chains, that we could live the lives that we have now, even with everything that we're still grappling with. Like, that's where I am right now. And like, for me, that's where my energy is. It's just thinking about what that looks like for me as an individual and what that could look like for the world. Like, I'm really focused on just abolition and the work of liberation, of just removing the cops in our head that tell us you should be this and you should be that. Ignore your dreams, ignore your authenticity. Don't be the thing that you feel in your heart you want to be, that like Jay-Z thing. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? Like that thing. Like, I just want to cling to that within myself, and then imagine a world from that same space of like, what if there are no police? What if there is, you know, what if there are resources? What if our children are being educated properly? What if our healthcare system works? What if everyone has access to it? And instead of thinking, oh, that's a thing that'll never happen, start really tasting, feeling, seeing, believing what that world would feel like, even with no evidence of it, because that's what our ancestors did. And that's what so many of us, whether we even knew it or not, have done with these careers, have done with our lives. And so, yeah, that's where I am. And I think the question of like, what's next is probably better answered like 6-7 months from now, because that is when I think the next will live. Right now, we're in the middle, and I'm right there with y'all.
Oh my gosh, that was perfect. I need to that's going to be the sound clip. Thanks, guys. Denayja, this was great. I know, again, me and you can talk all day long, but we did good. We stayed under the time that we said.
We did. No, I'm proud. I'm proud of us.
I know. High five to us. Like, high five. Bam. High five. High five from far away, girl. But I really appreciate you coming on. If people wanted to get in contact with you, had any more questions, just wanted to talk to you because you're a wonderful person to talk to, where can they contact you?
Talk to me, please. Please talk to me nice. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so if you want to like actually really like talk to me, I'm on Twitter. I love Twitter. I'm never leaving that app. I don't care. Like, I just like, it's my favorite. So if you really want to like have conversations, I'm on Twitter. Girl W that laugh. So at Girl W that laugh on Twitter. If you want to just look at me, and sometimes hear the things that I say, I do that mostly on Instagram. So on Instagram, I'm at Girl with that laugh, because Instagram let me have the full word, and Twitter just let me have the W. So Instagram is at Girl With That Laugh. And if you like what you see, please DM me because Mama's single.
You hear that? Slide those DMs.
And I'm out here. I only date women, though.
Oh,
Please don't
no
any
dudes.
men DM me about anything. I will block you. But if you are a lady who likes the ladies, call me. Okay? Listen, open mouth, don't get fed. Closed mouth, don't get fed, Loryn. All right?
That girl said, listen, if you a lady looking for a lady, holler at your girl, okay?
Listen.
Woo, Denayja, you have, oh my God, you got me in tears. You are a fool. See, let us go. You know what? I'm about to get in my wrap up, but Denayja, thank you. Look, I can't even say it. Denayja, thank you for being on. This was great. And, you know, you gave some jewels, so I'm going to put those in my wrap up. But thanks again, girl.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Denayja is so funny, y'all. She cracks me up. But that was good. I think she hit on some really just like good points and just gave a lot of encouragement to people who are kind of in that professional grief of trying to figure out what is next. And I mean, who is it? I mean, honestly, aren't we always striving for something greater, right? But I just think she hit on a lot of great things. So I just, of course, wanted to close on a little bit of what our conversation was about. So I loved when she said that her journey is kind of that journey to authenticity. And I think that's important, is being who you are, authentic to self. And that is kind of what's going to lead you to where you need to be professionally, personally, or whatever. Because I think who you are is going to take you far. Unless you're just like a really nasty person, then, probably need to do some personal development, probably need to pray on a little therapy. But, people like authenticity. People, as we're getting older, or not even older, as we're getting into year after year, people are wanting something real. People don't want all this fake stuff. And I think she made a valid point, is that people are paying attention to what is important, right? And so what's important for you in your life, and I think being authentic to who you are will kind of lead you in that direction of where you need to go next. And like we both talked about, just reimagining who you are and where you want to be. I mean, the time is now, y'all. We're in this crazy time of this pandemic. Yes, things are opening up, but people, i.e. me, are still like not comfortable going outside, and just a weird new norm. And so this is the time to reimagine who you are and where you want to be. If you want to start that business, start that business. If you want to go back to school, like, go ahead and look into it. Like, this is the time, write that book. This is the time, y'all. Just reimagine, if that's what you want to do. But I think that goes back to being authentic to who you are, to say, okay, this is who I am, and how can I reimagine this life that I have with who I am? Because you may have been living kind of in this journey or this track that you thought was right, and that was getting you to, or kind of keeping you in a place of comfort. But now it's to say, okay, I'm Loryn Denise. This is who I am. How can I reimagine a place or something that is going to work for me, that allows me to be my authentic self? So I think that's super important, is to just reimagine, use this time to reimagine who you are and where you want to be. And I'm trying to see if this will be my last point. Well, yeah, it'll kind of be my last point. So like she was talking about, that t-shirt that's going around, that I'm my ancestors' wildest dreams. But think about that, though. Honestly, like, we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. Like, literally, we can do, quote unquote, whatever we want to do. We have the freedom, again, I'm using these things lightly and in quotes, to be able to do things that we want to do. But just imagine what your ancestor now, right? Think about how big that you can dream to create these moments and these times for the generations to come ahead of you. So dream big now and create those moments so that when those times do come, they can say, wow, like my great, 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 great dreamed so big that it allowed me to do X, Y, and Z, or they stood up in this moment and it allowed me to be whatever, or they created this because they dreamed so big, it allowed me to do, insert whatever they're doing at that time. And so I think it's important, like she said, is to really kind of live in that space of what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? Like walk in that, feel that, like really embrace that and just imagine how much bigger you can think, or just really see and really believe in that vision and manifest. I know manifest is like the hot topic or the hot word for 2020, maybe in 2019, but definitely in 2020, everybody's manifesting everything. But I think it's important to manifest, pray, meditate on those things, and just walk and to say, like, if I knew I couldn't fail, like, what can I do? And just do it, y'all. And pivot, not pivot, reimagine, who you are, and just create those moments for yourself. Because again, like, we could be in a space of like, gosh, I hate it here, or I hate where I'm at, professionally. Well, go ahead and reimagine. Okay, I am, insert your name, and this is who I imagine that I can be if I am authentic to myself. And I'm going to dream big and create and walk in that space to say that I cannot fail, and just see what can happen. And as always, as I always tell you guys, be kind to yourself, give yourself grace, and just know that your time is coming, and to really, really wholeheartedly believe that and walk in that. So that is it, you guys. I know, y'all be hearing these vocals. Thank you so much for listening to another week's episode of This Too Shall Suck podcast, where we talk about the real of grief, the whole grief, and nothing but the grief. This episode was produced by Mike Sick, and our original music is produced by Jimmy Samaj. You can follow me on social media on Instagram at TTSSPod, and you can visit my website at thistooshallsuckpodcast.com. Also, feel free to drop me a line about any questions or topics you want to hear, or if you have any guests, or if you want to be a guest. Just say what's up at hello@thistooshallsuckpodcast.com. Wherever you're listening, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe, and share this podcast with someone you think it could help. As always, I love you guys, and I'm sending you love and light in your life because you deserve it. I'll see you on the next episode. Mwah!